Everyone needed it. No one could live without it. And for over 2,000 years, one Chinese government after another quietly used it to fill their treasuries. The thing was salt. It is late autumn in an ancient village, and a family gathers around a rough wooden table. The father takes a small handful of gray grains and rubs them, slowly, into a fresh cut of pork. This is the work that will decide whether they survive the winter. Without those grains, the meat would rot within days. The fish would spoil. And in a long winter, with no fresh food, a weakened body could fail. To this family, salt was not a seasoning. It was the difference between life and death. Before cold storage existed, this was the only way to keep meat and fish through the freezing months. Every family, rich or poor, in every corner of the land, needed it, and there was no substitute. Nothing else would do the job. And here is the trap hidden inside that simple need. When people must buy something no matter the price, they will keep paying. They cannot refuse it. End quote. So whoever controls the salt controls a quiet, endless river of money. Raise the price, and people still buy. Double it, and they still come back. A ruler who taxed salt did not need to ask. The money flowed in on its own, day after day, from millions of tables across the country. Now, hold that small pinch of salt in your mind, and look far ahead. That humble handful is tied, across 2,000 years, to a wall of stone that climbs over mountains and runs to the horizon, the wall that millions still travel to see. The money squeezed from salt helped pay for armies, for officials, for whole dynasties, and for the guarding of that long frontier. We are going to follow the trail, grain by grain, from the kitchen table to the Great Wall. And here is what makes this story almost unbelievable. State control of salt began in the 7th century BCE, older than most of recorded Chinese history, and it did not fully end until the first day of 2017, a single tax that lasted more than 2,000 years. Let us go back to its birth. Picture the coast of eastern China in the 7th century BCE. The sea pulls back over wide flats of mud, and the sun bakes a thin white crust into the shallow pools. Workers scrape that crust into baskets. This gray-white powder is about to become the most reliable money on earth. Inland, other workers haul buckets up from deep brine wells, pour the salty water into wide iron pans, and feed fires beneath them until only crystals remain. Slowly, an idea took hold among the rulers. Do not tax this from a distance. Take the whole trade into the hands of the state. This was one of the oldest monopolies anywhere in the world. And the rulers had chosen their target with cold cleverness. Think about what salt is, compared with everything else they might have controlled. You cannot skip salt. A rich man and a poor man both need it, every day, all year. And once a person eats it, it is gone. So they must come back and buy more, forever. No other tax renews itself like that. It was a river of money that never ran dry. Now jump forward 5 centuries to the year 119 BCE. The Han dynasty is at war. Emperor Wu has pushed the borders of the empire far out across deserts and grasslands, fighting fierce horsemen of the north. Armies cost grain, horses, weapons, and silver. The treasury is bleeding. Inside the palace, officials count and recount the empty stores. The wars must continue, but there is no money to pay for them. Then comes the fateful decree. Emperor Wu reaches for the 2 substances every household in China cannot live without. Salt and iron are made official monopolies of the state. The tool that tills the field and the grain that preserves the meat now both belong at the source to the empire. The most basic things in daily life had been quietly seized to pay for an emperor's ambitions. But here is the quiet genius of it. The state did not send a taxman knocking on every door. Instead, it controlled where salt could be made and how it could be moved, then sold those rights at its own price. The cost hid inside the salt itself, and almost no one could see it. That hidden machine is what we follow next. Picture how it really worked. The state did not make the salt itself. It picked the men who were allowed to make it and the men who were allowed to carry it, then sold those permissions to merchants for a price. The merchant paid the state up front. Then he sold the salt onward and quietly added that cost on top, so the buyer at the market paid a higher price. The state had its money long before the salt ever reached the kitchen. Here is the part that made it almost perfect. The peasant never saw a tax bill. No officer came to his door. He simply paid a little more for the salt he had to buy anyway, and never knew the state's hand was already inside his bowl. Then the great Han Empire broke apart. China split into rival kingdoms that fought each other for survival. And the rulers of those broken states reached for the one machine they knew would keep paying the salt monopoly. It worked beyond their hopes. In some of these fractured states, between the 3rd and 5th centuries, salt brought in 80 to 90% of all the money the government collected. One taxed good was holding up entire kingdoms. But a money machine that good never stays simple. Over the centuries, it grew into a bureaucratic monster. To move legal salt across the land, a trader had to pay tax after tax after tax at one checkpoint after another. In one province, Hubei, a historian later counted the toll. To carry salt across that single province, a merchant had to pay 42 separate taxes. Not 42 over a lifetime, 42 to cross one stretch of land just once. So, picture the result. Official salt was costly, taxed at every turn, and often dirty and poor in quality. When the legal thing is expensive and bad, people will always find another way. And in the shadows, a different kind of salt was already moving, sold by smugglers. Out past the city walls, where the lantern light ran thin, men moved heavy sacks on their backs in the dark. Inside that coarse cloth was salt, cheaper salt, salt that had never paid a single tax. These were the smugglers. They knew every back road, every gap between the guard posts, every hour the inspectors grew tired. To the state, they were criminals. To the poor villager, who could not afford official salt, they were something else, the only honest seller in town. But this was no small trade. Sell enough untaxed salt, and the money piled up fast enough to buy weapons, hire men, and feed an army. Some smugglers stopped hiding from the state altogether and started fighting it. The profits from gray crystal armed open rebellion. What began as men slipping past checkpoints grew into bands of fighters challenging the empire itself, paid for by the very thing the empire tried to control. And here was the trap the rulers could never escape. To fill the treasury, they raised the price of salt. But the higher the price climbed, the more the people turned to the smugglers, and the more dangerous those smugglers became. It was a contradiction built into the system itself. The price that fed the state also fed the rebellion against it. Every coin squeezed from a salt buyer pushed someone closer to the shadow market and closer to revolt. Now, turn the coin over. While smugglers fought in the dark, the merchants who held the legal salt rights lived in another world entirely. They grew rich beyond imagining some of the wealthiest people in all of China. Their fortunes built the famous gardens of Suzhou, quiet courtyards of still ponds, curved bridges, and delicate pavilions of carved wood. Walk through them today, and you are walking through wealth grown from a single pinch of gray salt. Now, jump forward to the year 1368. A new dynasty seizes the throne, the Ming, and inherits an old fear. Far to the north, beyond the dust and the cold passes, riders are always waiting, so the Ming decide to build on a scale no one had ever attempted. This is the wall the world pictures today, not packed earth, but stone and brick dragged up the mountains and laid by hand. Sections rose 6 to 7 meters tall and 4 to 5 meters wide enough for soldiers to march along the top. And it took over 200 years of labor. Generations of workers were born, grew old, and died while the same wall crept along the mountains, brick by brick, ridge by ridge, never quite finished. But here is the truth. most people miss. A frontier like this is not a single bill you pay once. It is a hunger that never ends. Money to build, money to garrison, money to feed the soldiers, and money to repair the cracks every single year. So where did that endless money come from? From many rivers, but one of the steadiest, quietest rivers was salt. Year after year, the same hidden tax flowed into the treasury that paid the armies and held the frontier line. Now, let us be honest, because the truth is better than the legend. Salt did not build the Great Wall by itself. The wall was raised across many dynasties and paid for from many sources. But the steady, hidden salt tax was one of the strongest and quietest streams that made building it and guarding it possible. So stand on that wall for a moment, in the cold wind, and follow the thread all the way back. Every brick beneath your feet was guarded by a soldier, and that soldier was fed, in part, by money quietly drawn from the salt in ordinary bowls. A peasant by his fire, rubbing gray grains into pork before winter, never knew his coins climbed these mountains, yet they did. From one pinch of salt to a wall the whole world would one day come to see. Watch the centuries roll past. The Han fell, and then came the Tang, the Song, the Yuan, the Ming. Emperors died, palaces burned, borders shifted. But the salt monopoly stayed, quietly collecting its coins through it all. 2,000 years it endured, longer than almost any tax, any law, any throne, anywhere on earth. While ruling families came and went, this one quiet system simply refused to die. Now, jump almost to our own time. The year is 1931. China has trains, telegraphs, modern banks, and still, salt taxes brought in nearly 1/3 of the entire public budget. One pinch of gray crystal, funding 1/3 of a nation. Think about that. A tax born in the 7th century before Christ was still holding up a modern government more than 25 centuries later. Almost nothing humans build lasts that long. Yet this invisible tax kept on flowing. So when did it finally end? Here is the date that stuns historians. The salt monopoly, begun under ancient kings, was only fully ended on the 1st of January 2017. Few institutions on this earth can match a life that long. Now bring it home to you. That same quiet trick did not vanish in 2017. It lives in your life right now. Look at the price of fuel, of tobacco, of small everyday things. Hidden inside each one is a tax you never see. You pay it without a bill, without a collector at your door, just a slightly higher price on something you keep buying. The exact same logic the ancient state discovered with salt now runs quietly through the modern world. The same hand that once reached into a peasant's salted pork still reaches into your pocket today. It learned the trick long ago. Tax the thing people cannot stop buying, and the money never stops. The oldest idea in the empire is still alive. So go back, one last time, to that wooden table before winter. A family rubs gray grains into a slab of pork, working it into the meat so the food will last the cold months. No tax collector knocks. No bill ever comes. And yet this family is paying for an empire. Hidden inside the price of that handful of salt is the quiet tribute that fed soldiers, armed garrisons, and helped raise stone across the mountains. They will never know it. That was always the point. This is the lesson older than the wall itself. When a state needs money, it cannot afford to miss. It does not chase the rich or beg the poor. It reaches for the one thing no person can refuse, and folds the cost so neatly into the price that no one feels the hand take it. From the 7th century before our era to the first day of 2017, that single idea outlived every emperor who used it. And it began here with a pinch of gray salt, pressed by tired hands into winter meat, on a quiet evening that history would never bother to record. The lesson is older than the wall itself. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe. There is always another one worth telling.